The morning sunlight filtered through the grand windows of Buckingham Palace as Queen Elizabeth sat in her private study, carefully reading a document that would change the royal family forever. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the ancient parchment, not from age, but from the weight of the decision she was about to make. For 3 months, the palace had been buzzing with whispered conversations and closed-door meetings. The Queen's private secretary, Sir James Morrison, had been working tirelessly with constitutional lawyers and historians to research something that had never been done before in the 1,000-year history of the British monarchy. The catalyst for all this upheaval was Princess Charlotte, the young daughter of Prince William and Catherine. At just 8 years old, Charlotte had already shown remarkable intelligence and a deep understanding of royal duties that surprised even the most seasoned palace staff. But it wasn't just her maturity that caught everyone's attention. 3 months earlier, during a state dinner with foreign dignitaries, Princess Charlotte had done something unprecedented. When the ambassador from a small African nation mentioned that his country was struggling with literacy programs for young girls, Charlotte had quietly approached him after dinner. She had spent her own pocket money to buy educational books and toys, which she personally handed to the ambassador with a handwritten note. The note, written in her careful child's handwriting, read, "Dear Mr. Ambassador, I heard about the girls in your country who want to learn to read. I hope these books help them. I want to help more children around the world learn. Can you teach me how?" From Princess Charlotte. The ambassador was so moved by this gesture that he shared the story with international media. Within days, the story had spread across the globe. Children from dozens of countries began writing letters to Princess Charlotte, asking for help with their education and sharing their dreams of learning. What happened next surprised everyone, including the Queen herself. Princess Charlotte didn't just read these letters. She began responding to each one personally. She started learning about different countries and their educational challenges. She asked her tutors to teach her basic phrases in different languages so she could write properly to children from various nations. The young princess began using her allowance and birthday money to send school supplies to children in need. She organized small charity events in the palace gardens, selling her own artwork and baked goods to raise money for international education programs. Palace staff watched in amazement as this 8-year-old girl displayed the kind of global consciousness and humanitarian spirit typically seen in much older royals. But Charlotte's activities had created an unusual problem for the palace. Traditional royal protocols didn't have provisions for such young royals to engage in official charitable work. The existing titles and roles within the royal family were designed for adults, with specific duties and responsibilities that couldn't be modified for a child. The Queen found herself in uncharted territory. Charlotte's actions were bringing positive attention to the monarchy and genuinely helping children around the world, but there was no official framework to support or recognize her work. The constitutional lawyers explained that creating a new royal title required approval from Parliament and would set a precedent for future generations. As the Queen sat in her study that morning, she reflected on the letters she had received from world leaders praising Charlotte's work. The Prime Minister of Canada had written personally to thank the young princess for inspiring Canadian children to start their own literacy programs. The President of Ghana had invited Charlotte to visit schools in his country when she was older. Sir James entered the study quietly, carrying another stack of letters addressed to Princess Charlotte. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "there are 43 more letters today from children around the world, and we've received official requests from 6 different countries, asking if Princess Charlotte could be their honorary ambassador for children's education." The Queen looked up from her document and sighed deeply. "James, in all my years as Queen, I never imagined I would face a situation like this. We have an 8-year-old princess who is conducting her own foreign relations through acts of kindness and charity." Sir James nodded solemnly. "The constitutional experts have finished their research, Your Majesty. There is historical precedent for creating new titles, but nothing quite like what we're considering. The closest example was when King Edward VII created the title of Princess Royal for his daughter in 1905. But that was a ceremonial honor, not an active role." The Queen stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where Charlotte often played. She could see her granddaughter in the distance, sitting under a tree with a pile of letters, carefully writing responses with the help of her governess. "What troubles me most James, is that Charlotte doesn't even know she's breaking protocol? To her, she's simply helping other children. She doesn't understand that her actions are creating constitutional questions that haven't been faced in centuries. Sir James approached the window and stood beside his queen. Perhaps that's exactly what makes this so special, Your Majesty. She's not acting as a princess following royal duty. She's acting as a child following her heart, and somehow that pure intention has created something more powerful than any formal diplomatic effort. The Queen turned to face her secretary with a determined look in her eyes. James, I want you to schedule a private family meeting for tomorrow evening. Prince William, Catherine, Prince Charles, and myself. We need to discuss this as a family before we make any official announcements. As Sir James left to arrange the meeting, Queen Elizabeth returned to her desk and picked up her pen. She began writing in her private diary, a habit she had maintained for decades. Today I realize that sometimes the most important changes in the monarchy come not from careful planning and ancient tradition, but from the simple, genuine actions of a child who sees the world as it should be, not as it is. Outside her window, Princess Charlotte continued writing her letters, unaware that her grandmother was about to make a decision that would create the most significant change in royal protocol in over a century. The palace bells chimed noon, marking not just another day but the beginning of a new chapter in royal history. The private dining room at Windsor Castle had never felt smaller to Prince William, as he sat across from his grandmother, father, and wife, waiting for the Queen to speak. The family had gathered as requested, but none of them fully understood why this meeting had been called with such urgency and secrecy. Catherine nervously adjusted her pearls, wondering if Charlotte had done something wrong. As a mother, she was proud of her daughter's charitable spirit, but she also worried about the attention it was bringing to such a young child. Prince Charles looked thoughtful, his fingers drumming silently on the polished mahogany table, while William appeared concerned about what this might mean for his daughter's childhood. Queen Elizabeth entered the room carrying a leather portfolio, her expression serious but not stern. She had spent the entire night reading constitutional law books and historical documents, preparing for a conversation that would challenge everything the royal family understood about tradition and protocol. I've called this meeting, the Queen began, settling into her chair at the head of the table, because Charlotte's activities have created a situation that requires immediate family discussion and decision-making. Catherine immediately spoke up, her maternal instincts kicking in. Ma'am, if Charlotte has overstepped any boundaries, William and I will speak with her immediately. We've been trying to guide her gently, but she's so passionate about helping these children. The Queen raised her hand gently. Catherine, you misunderstand. Charlotte hasn't done anything wrong. Quite the opposite, actually. She has done something so remarkably right that it's forcing us to reconsider centuries of royal tradition. She opened her portfolio and spread several documents across the table. In the past 3 months, Charlotte has received official correspondence from 47 different countries. 12 heads of state have personally written to thank her for inspiring charitable work in their nations. The United Nations Children's Fund has requested a meeting with her to discuss potential collaboration. Prince William leaned forward, his brow furrowed in confusion. Grandmother, I don't understand. Charlotte is 8 years old. She's not conducting official royal business. That's exactly the point, William, the Queen replied. She's not conducting official business, yet she's achieving more positive diplomatic impact than many of our formal state visits. The letters I've read from world leaders aren't just polite acknowledgments. They're genuine expressions of gratitude for real change happening in their countries because of Charlotte's example. Charles, who had remained quiet until now, finally spoke. Mother, are you suggesting that we formalize Charlotte's activities in some way? Queen Elizabeth nodded slowly. Charles, the constitutional lawyers have spent weeks researching this. What Charlotte is doing falls into a gap in royal protocol that we've never had to address before. She's too young for traditional royal duties, but too impactful to be ignored as simply a child's hobby. Catherine looked worried. Your Majesty, with all due respect, Charlotte is still just a little girl. She needs to have a normal childhood, or as normal as possible given her position. I completely agree, Catherine, the Queen replied warmly. Which is why what I'm proposing is so unusual. Instead of forcing Charlotte into an existing role, I want to create something entirely new that works around her childhood, not despite it. She pulled out a thick document from her portfolio. I've been working with our most senior constitutional advisors on creating a new title within the royal family, something that has never existed before. Princess Ambassador for Children's Global Education. The room fell silent. William and Catherine exchanged glances, while Charles studied his mother's face for any sign that she might be joking. But the Queen's expression remained serious and thoughtful. This title, she continued, would be specifically designed for Charlotte. It would formally recognize her work helping children around the world, but with built-in protections for her childhood. She would have no official duties or required appearances. Instead, the title would simply provide royal support and framework for the charitable work she's already choosing to do. William was the first to find his voice. "Grandmother, this is extraordinary. You're talking about changing royal tradition for an 8-year-old. "No, William," the Queen corrected him gently. "I'm talking about changing royal tradition because of what an 8-year-old has already accomplished." Charlotte didn't ask for recognition or titles. She simply saw children who needed help and decided to help them. The recognition is something the world has given her, and now we need to decide how to handle it responsibly. Catherine spoke up again, her voice filled with concern. What would this mean for Charlotte's education? Her privacy? Her relationship with her siblings? The Queen had clearly anticipated these questions. "Catherine, the title would be completely voluntary. Charlotte could step away from it at any time if she chose to focus on other interests. As for her education, we would actually enhance it by providing her with tutors who specialize in international relations and cultural studies, but only if she wants to learn more about the countries she's helping." She pulled out another document. As for privacy, the title would actually provide more protection. Right now, Charlotte is receiving international attention without any official framework to manage it. This title would allow us to properly support her work, while also setting boundaries about when and how she engages with media or foreign officials. Charles leaned back in his chair, processing the magnitude of what his mother was suggesting. "Mother, you realize this would require parliamentary approval? And once we create this precedent, future generations might expect similar accommodations?" "Charles, I've already spoken privately with the Prime Minister," the Queen revealed. "He believes Parliament would support this decision, especially given the positive international attention Charlotte's work has generated. As for future generations, perhaps it's time the monarchy showed more flexibility in how we serve the Commonwealth and the world." The Queen stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where Charlotte was playing with her younger brother George. "For over 70 years, I've followed tradition and protocol without question. But Charlotte has shown me something I didn't expect to learn at this stage of my life. Sometimes the most important service comes from the heart, not from duty." She turned back to face her family. "I'm not asking you to decide tonight. Take time to think about this. Discuss it together. But I want you to consider that we might be witnessing the beginning of a new chapter in how the royal family serves the world." As the meeting ended and the family members prepared to leave, Catherine approached the Queen privately. "Ma'am, may I ask what made you consider such a dramatic change?" The Queen smiled, and for a moment she looked not like the monarch of 16 realms, but like a proud grandmother. "Catherine, yesterday I received a letter from a 10-year-old girl in Bangladesh. She wrote to thank Charlotte for the book she sent, and mentioned that she's now teaching her younger sister to read. At the bottom of the letter, she drew a picture of herself wearing a crown with the words, 'I want to be a helper princess like Charlotte.'" The Queen paused, her eyes becoming misty. "In that moment, I realized that Charlotte isn't just helping individual children. She's changing how children around the world see the possibility of service and kindness. That kind of impact deserves recognition, even if it means creating something entirely new." The next morning, Princess Charlotte was having breakfast in the nursery with her brothers George and Louis, when her mother Catherine entered the room with an unusually serious expression. Charlotte immediately sensed something important was happening, though she couldn't imagine what it might be. "Charlotte, sweetheart," Catherine said, sitting down beside her daughter, "your father and I need to have a special conversation with you about the letters you've been writing to children around the world." Charlotte looked up from her porridge, a worried expression crossing her young face. "Mummy, am I in trouble?" "Did I do something wrong with the letters?" Catherine quickly reassured her. "No, darling, you're not in trouble at all. Actually, it's quite the opposite. Your letters and the help you've been giving to other children have made many important people very happy and proud." Over the next hour, Catherine and William carefully explained to Charlotte that her great-grandmother, the Queen, had noticed her work helping children in other countries. They told her about the letters from world leaders and the requests from different nations, trying to use simple language that an 8-year-old could understand. Charlotte listened intently, her eyes growing wider as she began to realize the scope of what her simple acts of kindness had created. "Mummy," she said quietly, "I just wanted to help the children who couldn't read. I didn't know grown-up people in other countries were watching." William knelt down to his daughter's eye level. "Charlotte, that's exactly what makes what you're doing so special. You weren't trying to impress anyone or get attention. You just saw children who needed help and decided to help them." Catherine then gently introduced the concept of the new title. "Sweetheart, Great-Granny has an idea about how to help you help even more children, but only if you want to. She's thinking about giving you a special name that would let everyone know you care about helping children learn." Charlotte's forehead wrinkled in concentration. "What kind of special name?" "It would be called Princess Ambassador for Children's Global Education," William explained. "It means you would be a special helper for children around the world who want to learn to read and go to school." Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she asked the question that her parents had been hoping she would ask. "Would I still be able to play with George and Louis? And would I still have time to write letters to my friends in other countries?" Catherine smiled, relieved by her daughter's priorities. "Yes, darling. You would still be our Charlotte first, and you would still do all the things you love doing. This special name would just mean that when you help other children, you'd have more grown-ups helping you do it better." What happened next surprised both parents. Charlotte asked if she could think about it overnight and talk to some of the children she'd been writing to before making a decision. This level of thoughtfulness from an 8-year-old impressed William and Catherine, but it also made them realize that Charlotte was already developing the kind of careful consideration that would serve her well in any official role. That evening, Charlotte sat in her bedroom with a stack of letters from children around the world. She had asked her governess to help her understand what some of the children had written about their schools and their dreams. As she read, she began to understand that her simple acts of sending books and school supplies had grown into something much larger. One letter from a 12-year-old boy in Kenya particularly moved her. He had written, "Dear Princess Charlotte, because of the books you sent to my school, my teacher was able to start a reading club. Now 10 more children in my village know how to read. My little sister is one of them. She wants to be a teacher someday because of you." Another letter from a 9-year-old girl in the Philippines showed Charlotte that her impact was spreading beyond just the children she directly helped. "Dear Princess Charlotte, I heard about you helping children learn to read. I asked my parents if I could use my birthday money to buy books for the children in the orphanage near our house. Now I have pen pals there, just like you have pen pals everywhere." As Charlotte read letter after letter, she began to realize that her actions had inspired other children to help each other. This understanding changed something in her young mind. She wasn't just helping individual children anymore. She was helping children help other children. The next morning, Charlotte asked to speak with her great-grandmother privately. Queen Elizabeth was surprised by this request, as Charlotte had never asked for a private audience before, but she immediately agreed to meet with her great-granddaughter. They met in the Queen's private sitting room, with Charlotte perched on the edge of a large armchair, her legs swinging nervously as she tried to find the right words. "Great-Granny," she began, "Mummy and Daddy told me about the special name you want to give me." The Queen nodded encouragingly. "Yes, Charlotte. What do you think about it?" Charlotte took a deep breath, displaying a maturity that surprised even the Queen. "Great-Granny, I've been reading the letters from my friends in other countries. I didn't know that when I helped them, they would start helping other children too. Now there are children I've never met who are learning to read because of books that other children bought after hearing about my letters." The Queen leaned forward, intrigued by her great-granddaughter's understanding of the ripple effect her actions had created. Charlotte continued, "I think maybe the special name would help me help more children. But Great-Granny, I don't want the name to make the children think I'm more important than them. I want them to know that they can help other children too, even without a special name." The Queen was struck by the wisdom of this 8-year-old child. "Charlotte, what do you think would help the children understand that?" Charlotte thought for a moment. Maybe instead of just me having the special name, we could make a club for children who want to help other children learn. I could be like the leader of the club, but all the children who help could be special helpers too. This suggestion sparked an idea in the Queen's mind that she hadn't considered before. Charlotte wasn't just asking for recognition. She was instinctively understanding that her role should be about empowering other children, not just being honored herself. "Charlotte," the Queen said slowly, "that is a brilliant idea. We could create something called the Global Children's Education Alliance. You could be the first Princess Ambassador, but other children who help could become junior ambassadors." Charlotte's face lit up with excitement. "Could my friends who are already helping other children be junior ambassadors too? Like the girl in the Philippines who bought books for the orphanage?" The Queen nodded, realizing that Charlotte had just suggested something far more innovative than anyone had imagined. Instead of creating a traditional royal title that elevated one person, Charlotte was proposing a movement that could elevate children around the world. "Charlotte," the Queen said with pride, "I think you've just helped me understand how to make this even better than I originally planned." The weeks following Charlotte's conversation with the Queen were filled with unprecedented activity in the palace. Constitutional lawyers worked around the clock to draft the legal framework for not just a new royal title, but an entirely new concept, a royal-led international children's organization that could operate across Commonwealth nations and beyond. Sir James Morrison found himself coordinating with government officials, international relations experts, and child development specialists to ensure that Charlotte's vision of a global children's education alliance could become reality. The complexity of creating something that had never existed before was staggering, but the enthusiasm from unexpected quarters kept the project moving forward. The Prime Minister's office had initially approached the idea with cautious skepticism, but after receiving phone calls from 6 different Commonwealth heads of government expressing enthusiasm for the proposal, their stance shifted dramatically. The Canadian Prime Minister had personally called to say that Canadian schools were already organizing Charlotte-inspired literacy drives, and that official recognition of the movement would be welcomed by his government. Meanwhile, Charlotte continued her letter-writing activities, unaware of the political and constitutional machinery working behind the scenes. However, palace staff began to notice changes in how she approached her correspondence. She had started asking her governess to teach her about the geography and cultures of the countries she was writing to, and she had begun including small drawings of British landmarks in her letters, instinctively engaging in a form of cultural diplomacy. The breakthrough moment came when Charlotte received a letter from a 10-year-old boy in New Zealand who had organized his entire school to collect books for children in Pacific Island nations. He had written, "Dear Princess Charlotte, my teacher told us about what you're doing and we want to help too. We've collected 500 books so far, and our school is going to send them to schools in Fiji and Samoa. Can we be part of your team?" When Charlotte showed this letter to her parents, she asked a question that would reshape the entire project. "Mummy, if children in New Zealand want to help children in Fiji, and I want to help children everywhere, shouldn't we all be working together instead of separately?" This simple observation from an 8-year-old led to an emergency meeting between the Queen, her constitutional advisors, and representatives from several Commonwealth nations. Within 48 hours, preliminary discussions had begun about creating the first royal-led, international organization specifically designed to coordinate children, helping other children. The logistics were complex beyond anything the royal family had ever attempted. The new title of Princess Ambassador for Children's Global Education would need to be recognized not just by the British Parliament, but by the governments of every nation where Charlotte's organization would operate. The legal framework had to account for child protection laws in dozens of different countries, while also providing a structure that could grow and adapt as Charlotte matured. But the most challenging aspect was maintaining Charlotte's original vision, that this should be about children empowering other children, not about adults directing children's charitable activities. The constitutional lawyers struggled to create a framework that would provide proper oversight and protection, while still allowing the organic, child-led spirit that had made Charlotte's work so effective. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chen, a child development expert from Oxford University, who had been consulted on the project, suggested that the organization should operate more like a pen pal network than a traditional charity. Children would connect directly with other children, sharing ideas and resources, while adults provided support and safety oversight without controlling the children's interactions. This approach excited Charlotte when it was explained to her. So children in different countries could write to each other and help each other learn, and the grown-ups would just make sure we're all safe and that the letters get delivered properly? The Queen nodded. Exactly, Charlotte. You would be the Princess Ambassador, which means you would be like the first pen pal who showed everyone how wonderful it could be to help children in other countries. But every child who joins would be just as important as you are. As plans developed, the palace began receiving unprecedented international attention. Foreign ministers from African nations called to express their government's support. The European Union sent a delegation to discuss how the organization could complement existing educational initiatives. Even the United Nations began preliminary talks about potential collaboration. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from the children themselves. Word about Charlotte's work had spread through informal networks of teachers, parents, and community leaders around the world. Letters began arriving at the palace not just for Charlotte, but requesting information about how to join her team of helper children. A letter from a group of children in rural Australia particularly impressed the Queen. 23 children had written together, "Dear Princess Charlotte and Queen Elizabeth, we heard that Princess Charlotte is making a special club for children who want to help other children learn. We have collected money from our allowances and bought solar-powered radios for children in rural Indonesia so they can listen to educational programs. Can we please join Princess Charlotte's club? We promise to be good helpers." These letters revealed that children around the world were already organizing themselves to help each other, inspired by Charlotte's example but not waiting for official permission or structure. The realization that a global movement of child-led charitable activity was already emerging changed how everyone involved viewed the project. "Sir," James Morrison called an urgent meeting with the Queen's communications team. "Your Majesty," he reported, "we're not just creating a new royal title or even a new organization. We're formalizing a movement that children have already started. The question is no longer whether we should do this, but how quickly we can provide the framework these children need to operate safely and effectively." The Queen made a decision that surprised her advisors. Instead of waiting for all the legal and constitutional details to be finalized, she announced that she would make a preliminary public statement acknowledging Charlotte's work and the international response it had generated. This would give the public and international community time to understand what was being proposed before the formal announcement of the new title. The statement, released through the palace press office, was carefully crafted. Her Majesty the Queen acknowledges the remarkable response to Princess Charlotte's correspondence with children around the world regarding educational opportunities. The enthusiasm shown by young people internationally for collaborative learning support has prompted consideration of how the royal family might best support such worthy endeavors. The response to this simple statement exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 24 hours, the palace had received over 3,000 letters from children in 67 different countries, all expressing interest in joining Charlotte's effort to help other children access education. The Queen realized that Charlotte's simple act of kindness had created something unprecedented. A global community of children united by their desire to help each other learn and grow. The new royal title wasn't just recognizing Charlotte's individual achievement. It was acknowledging the birth of a new form of international cooperation, led by children themselves. As Charlotte read through letters from her new international friends that evening, she looked up at her mother and asked, "Mummy, when Great-Granny gives me the special name, will all these children really become my partners in helping others?" Catherine smiled, realizing that Charlotte understood something that had taken the adults weeks to figure out. This was never about creating a title for one special princess, but about empowering children everywhere to believe they could make a difference in the world. The great ballroom at Buckingham Palace had been transformed into something unprecedented in royal history. Instead of the usual formal seating arrangements for state occasions, child-sized chairs were arranged in colorful clusters around the room, with adult seating positioned around the perimeter. Interactive displays showed maps of the world with photos and drawings sent by children from dozens of countries, creating a vibrant celebration of global childhood rather than traditional royal pageantry. Charlotte stood at the window of her private room, watching as international delegations arrived at the palace. But these weren't the usual diplomatic entourages. Mixed in with government officials and ambassadors were children and teenagers from various countries, some accompanied by teachers or parents, others by community leaders who had helped coordinate their local educational initiatives. The Queen had made an unprecedented decision. The formal announcement of Charlotte's new title would be made in the presence of children from around the world who had been inspired by her work to start their own helping projects. This had required months of coordination between multiple governments, embassies, and child protection agencies, but the result was unlike anything the royal family had ever hosted. Among the young international guests was Amara, a 12-year-old from Ghana, who had used Charlotte's example to convince her village to start a mobile library program. There was also James from Canada, whose Books for the North program had sent reading materials to remote indigenous communities in the Arctic. 8-year-old Maria from the Philippines had organized children in her neighborhood to teach literacy skills to younger children, creating a peer-to-peer education network that had spread across 3 provinces. Each of these children had their own remarkable stories, but what united them was that they had all been inspired by Charlotte's simple act of caring about children she had never met. Palace staff had spent weeks learning about these young guests, understanding that this ceremony would be celebrating not just Charlotte's achievement, but the worldwide movement she had inadvertently started. The constitutional ceremony itself had required months of preparation. Parliament had unanimously approved the creation of the new title, with MPs from all parties expressing enthusiasm for what many called the most positive development in modern royal history. The Archbishop of Canterbury had agreed to participate in blessing the new role, though the ceremony would be significantly different from traditional royal occasions, but the most complex preparations had involved creating the legal framework for the Global Children's Education Alliance. International lawyers had worked with governments across 6 continents to establish protocols that would allow children to safely communicate and coordinate educational support across national boundaries. The result was a system that combined the reach of international diplomacy with the safety protections of modern child welfare programs. Charlotte herself had been remarkably calm throughout all the preparations. While adults around her struggled with the complexity of creating something entirely new, she continued writing letters to her international friends and making plans for how they could help more children together. Her innocence of the historical significance of what was happening seemed to be exactly what kept the project grounded in its original purpose. The morning of the ceremony, Charlotte had breakfast with some of the international children who were staying at the palace. The Queen had insisted that the young guests be treated not as visiting dignitaries, but as Charlotte's friends, and the relaxed atmosphere around the breakfast table reflected this approach. "Charlotte," asked Kemi, a 10-year-old from Nigeria, who had started a girls' education program in her community, "are you nervous about getting your special name today?" Charlotte thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I'm excited but not nervous. Great-Granny says that having the special name just means I can help more children learn, and I've always wanted to do that. Plus, now I have all of you to help me." This simple exchange, overheard by several palace staff members, perfectly captured why Charlotte's approach to her new role was so remarkable. While adults saw the ceremony as a historic moment requiring careful protocol and formal recognition, Charlotte saw it as the beginning of a bigger friendship network focused on helping children around the world. As the ceremony time approached, international media gathered outside the palace in unprecedented numbers. But the coverage was unlike typical royal event reporting. Instead of focusing on fashion, protocol, or political implications, journalists found themselves telling stories about the children who had traveled from around the world to celebrate peer-to-peer educational support. The BBC's royal correspondent found herself interviewing a group of teenagers from Australia who had raised money to provide educational technology to schools in rural Indonesia. CNN spoke with children from various African nations who had created exchange programs to share educational resources across borders. The international media, accustomed to covering formal royal ceremonies, discovered themselves documenting something entirely new, a celebration of children's capacity to help other children. Inside the palace, The Queen made final preparations for what she privately considered the most important ceremony of her reign. The formal announcement would introduce not just Charlotte's new title, but the entire framework of the Global Children's Education Alliance. However, the Queen had decided that the ceremony should emphasize the collective achievement of all the children present rather than focusing solely on Charlotte's individual recognition. Prince William and Catherine watched from a balcony as Charlotte mingled easily with children from around the world, switching between English and the few phrases she had learned in various languages to communicate with her new friends. Both parents realized that their daughter had developed a natural diplomacy that would serve her well in her new role, but more importantly, she had maintained the genuine caring that had started this entire movement. As the ceremony began, Charlotte took her place not at the front of the room as would be traditional for someone receiving a royal title, but in the center of a circle of children from around the world. The Queen had specifically designed this arrangement to symbolize that Charlotte's new role was not about being elevated above other children, but about being connected to them. The Archbishop of Canterbury began the ceremony with words that acknowledged the unprecedented nature of the occasion. We gather today not to witness the conferring of a traditional royal title, but to celebrate the birth of a new form of service that comes from the heart of childhood itself. Princess Charlotte has shown us that the desire to help others learn and grow knows no boundaries of age, nationality, or protocol. As Charlotte prepared to accept her new title, she looked around at the faces of children from dozens of countries and realized that this moment was not just about her receiving recognition. It was about all of them committing to continue helping children around the world access education and opportunity. The Queen stepped forward with a document that had been crafted by constitutional experts from multiple nations. But before reading the formal language, she looked directly at Charlotte and said, "Charlotte, are you ready to accept the responsibility of being the first Princess Ambassador for children's global education, and to work with children around the world to ensure that every child has the opportunity to learn and grow?" Charlotte stood up straight, looked at her great-grandmother, then at the children around her, and gave an answer that would be quoted in history books for generations. "Yes, great-granny. We're all ready to help children everywhere learn to read and follow their dreams." The moment Queen Elizabeth placed the specially designed medallion around Charlotte's neck, representing her new title as Princess Ambassador for Children's Global Education, cameras around the world captured something that had never been seen before. A royal ceremony where the recipient immediately turned to share the honor with other children. Charlotte's first act as the newest titled member of the royal family was to invite each international child guest to step forward and receive their own medallion, designating them as the first junior ambassadors of the Global Children's Education Alliance. The Queen watched with pride as her great-granddaughter handed out the honors with the same care and attention she had shown when writing letters to children she had never met. "Amara," Charlotte said to the girl from Ghana, "you showed your whole village that girls can be teachers and leaders. You're now a junior ambassador for West Africa." The 12-year-old beamed as Charlotte placed the medallion around her neck, and then surprised everyone by curtsying to Charlotte and saying in careful English, "Thank you, Princess Charlotte, for teaching me that children can change the world." The ceremony continued as Charlotte recognized each child present, acknowledging their specific contributions to educational initiatives in their home regions. James from Canada became the junior ambassador for Arctic education, while Maria from the Philippines was designated as the junior ambassador for peer-to-peer learning. Each recognition was personal, specific, and demonstrated that Charlotte had taken the time to understand and appreciate what each child had accomplished. The international media, broadcasting live to audiences worldwide, found themselves documenting something unprecedented in royal history. Traditional royal ceremonies focused on individual achievement and formal recognition, but this event celebrated collective accomplishment and shared responsibility. The children's genuine excitement and the informal atmosphere created a completely different narrative about what royal service could look like in the modern world. But the most remarkable moment came when Charlotte asked to address the assembled group directly, without prepared remarks or formal protocol. Standing in the center of the circle of children, she spoke words that would be remembered as one of the most significant royal speeches of the century. "I want to thank Great-Granny and all the grown-ups who helped us have this special day. But mostly I want to thank all of you for showing me that one person, Helping other people can become many people helping many people. When I first sent books to children far away, I thought I was just being kind. But you taught me that kindness grows when it's shared. She paused, looking around at faces from dozens of countries, before continuing. I promise that even though I have a special name now, I will always remember that the most important thing is not the name, but the helping. And I promise that we will work together to make sure every child in the world gets the chance to learn and dream and grow. The spontaneous applause that followed came not just from the children present, but from the adults watching around the world. Social media platforms were flooded with videos of the ceremony. But unlike typical royal event coverage, the focus was on the message rather than the pageantry. The immediate international response exceeded everyone's expectations. Within hours of the ceremony's conclusion, the palace received official communications from 43 different countries, expressing their government's support for the Global Children's Education Alliance. The President of Kenya announced that his country would establish official partnership agreements with the alliance. The Prime Minister of New Zealand declared that New Zealand schools would participate in pen pal programs, coordinated through Charlotte's organization. But perhaps more significantly, children around the world began organizing themselves without waiting for official invitations or adult supervision. Schools in Brazil announced student-led campaigns to support literacy programs in Portuguese-speaking African nations. Children in Japan organized to provide educational materials to rural schools throughout Asia. A group of teenagers in Sweden started a program to teach Nordic languages to refugee children across Europe. The palace communications team, accustomed to managing typical royal announcement responses, found themselves struggling to keep up with the volume and diversity of international reactions. Sir James Morrison had to expand his staff to handle correspondence from children's organizations, schools, and youth groups from countries that had never previously communicated with the British royal family. The most touching responses came directly from children. A 7-year-old boy from rural Mexico sent a hand-drawn picture of himself and Charlotte reading books together, with a message in Spanish that translated to, "Princess Charlotte, I cannot read yet, but my sister read me about your special day. When I learn to read, I will help other children like you do." An 11-year-old girl from Bangladesh wrote, "Dear Princess Ambassador Charlotte, I saw your ceremony on television at our school. Our teacher told us that you started helping children when you were our age. We want to start helping too. Can you teach us how to write letters to children in other countries?" These personal responses from individual children demonstrated that Charlotte's new title had achieved something beyond official recognition. It had created a global understanding that children could be active participants in international cooperation and humanitarian service. The Queen spent the evening after the ceremony reading through the international responses with Charlotte, helping her 8-year-old great-granddaughter understand the magnitude of what had been accomplished. But what impressed the Queen most was Charlotte's reaction to the attention and praise. "Great Granny," Charlotte said as they reviewed letters from world leaders congratulating her on the new title. "All these important people are being very nice. But the letters I like best are the ones from children who want to help other children. Can we write back to all of them and tell them how to get started?" This response confirmed what the Queen had suspected. Charlotte's motivation remained pure and focused on the practical work of helping others, rather than on enjoying the recognition she had received. The new title had not changed her fundamental approach to service. It had simply provided her with better tools and support to do what she had always wanted to do. As news of the ceremony spread through international media over the following days, something unexpected began to happen. The story of Charlotte's new title became secondary to stories about the children she had inspired around the world. News outlets found themselves reporting on educational initiatives that children were starting in their own communities, all inspired by the example of peer-to-peer helping that Charlotte had demonstrated. The palace realized that they had created something unprecedented, a royal title that functioned as a catalyst for grassroots international cooperation, led by children themselves. Instead of Charlotte being the focus of attention, she had become the symbolic center of a worldwide network of young people committed to helping each other access education and opportunity. A week after the ceremony, Charlotte received a letter that perfectly captured what her new title had accomplished. It came from a group of children at a small school in rural Uganda. "Dear Princess Ambassador Charlotte, we heard about your special ceremony and your new job helping children around the world. We want you to know that you have inspired us to help children in our neighboring villages who don't have schools. We are going to teach them under our favorite tree every afternoon. Thank you for showing us that we don't have to wait until we're grown-ups to make a difference. Your friends in Uganda. As Charlotte read this letter aloud to her family at dinner that evening, the Queen realized that the ceremony had been just the beginning of something that would grow far beyond anything they had originally imagined. 6 months after receiving her groundbreaking title, Princess Charlotte sat in a specially designed study within Kensington Palace, surrounded by maps, letters, and photographs from children in 93 different countries. The room had been transformed from a traditional royal office into something that looked more like a colorful classroom, with bulletin boards displaying children's artwork and a large world map covered in colorful pins marking the locations of Global Children's Education Alliance participants. The impact of Charlotte's new role had exceeded everyone's most optimistic projections. What had started as one 8-year-old's desire to help other children read had evolved into the largest child-led international educational network in history. The Alliance now facilitated connections between over 50,000 children across 6 continents, with new participants joining daily. Charlotte's typical day had adapted to accommodate her unprecedented responsibilities while protecting her childhood. Mornings were still devoted to her regular education, but afternoons were spent on Alliance activities, reading letters from international friends, recording video messages for children in different time zones, and participating in virtual meetings with junior ambassadors around the world. The technology supporting the Alliance had been donated by major corporations eager to associate with the positive global movement. Secure video calling systems allowed Charlotte to speak directly with children in remote locations, while translation software helped bridge language barriers. But the core of the program remained refreshingly simple: children helping other children through direct communication and shared resources. One of Charlotte's most treasured possessions was a handmade book created by children from 12 different countries, each contributing a page that showed how education had changed their lives. The book had been presented to her during a virtual ceremony, attended by over 1,000 children worldwide. Marking the 6-month anniversary of the Alliance, the page from Ahmed, a 10-year-old from Somalia, showed before and after drawings of his village school. The before picture showed a bare room with no supplies, while the after picture showed children sitting around tables covered with books, pencils, and maps sent through the Alliance network. His message read, "Princess Charlotte, because of your friends in England and Canada who sent us supplies, I can now teach my younger brother numbers and letters. Thank you for showing us that children everywhere care about each other." The international diplomatic implications of Charlotte's work continued to amaze foreign policy experts. Traditional diplomatic relationships between nations were often formal and sometimes strained, but the Alliance had created organic connections between countries through their youngest citizens. Children in nations with complicated political relationships found themselves collaborating on educational projects, completely unaware of the adult tensions that typically dominated international relations. The Queen had watched this development with particular fascination. During a private meeting with several foreign ambassadors, she had listened as they described how their home country's children were eagerly participating in Alliance activities, often leading to increased cultural understanding and positive feelings toward other nations among entire families and communities. "Your Majesty," the Canadian High Commissioner had reported, "we're seeing Canadian children learning about traditional games and stories from children in African nations, while teaching their own cultural traditions in return. The educational exchange is creating the kind of people-to-people diplomacy that our governments have been trying to achieve for decades." Similar reports came from ambassadors around the world. The Alliance had inadvertently become a powerful tool for what diplomatic experts called soft power, the ability to influence international relationships through cultural attraction and shared values rather than military or economic pressure. But for Charlotte, the most meaningful aspect of her new role remained the personal connections she was making with individual children. Every week brought new stories of young people who had been inspired to help others in their communities, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond the Alliance's formal programs. One story that particularly moved Charlotte came from Isabella, a 9-year-old in rural Argentina. Isabella had written to explain how Charlotte's example had inspired her to start teaching basic literacy to children in her village who couldn't attend the distant school. What started with Isabella teaching 3 younger children under a tree had grown into an informal outdoor school attended by 30 children from surrounding farms. "Dear Princess Ambassador Charlotte," Isabella had written, "you taught me that I don't have to wait until I'm a teacher to help other children learn. Now my outdoor school has older children teaching younger ones, just like you showed us was possible. We pretend we are all junior ambassadors like your friends from other countries." These stories of spontaneous leadership and community service among children worldwide convinced even the most skeptical observers that Charlotte's new title represented something genuinely transformative. Traditional royal roles, however well-intentioned, typically involved adults making charitable contributions or offering patronage to established organizations. Charlotte's role had created something entirely different, a framework that empowered children to become active agents of positive change in their own communities. The constitutional experts who had initially struggled to create legal frameworks for Charlotte's unprecedented title found themselves documenting a new model of royal service that other monarchies around the world were beginning to study and adapt. The Swedish royal family had announced plans to create a similar role for Crown Princess Estelle, while several Commonwealth nations were exploring ways to incorporate child-led diplomatic initiatives into their own governmental structures. As Charlotte's 9th birthday approached, palace staff began planning a celebration that would honor not just her personal milestone, but the first anniversary of the alliance's remarkable growth. Instead of a traditional royal birthday party, Charlotte had requested a global virtual celebration where children from around the world could share their own alliance projects and achievements. The Queen, reflecting on the extraordinary year that had transformed both Charlotte's life and the international perception of royal service, wrote in her private diary, "Charlotte's title was meant to recognize her individual achievement, but it has become something far more significant. She has shown us that true leadership in the modern world might come not from commanding others, but from inspiring them to discover their own capacity for kindness and service." On the evening before her 9th birthday, Charlotte sat in her study writing thank you letters to some of the junior ambassadors who had sent her birthday messages. As she carefully formed letters in different languages she had been learning, she looked up at her mother who was helping her with the more complex vocabulary. "Mummy," Charlotte said thoughtfully, "do you think Great-Granny knew that giving me the special name would help so many children around the world start helping each other?" Catherine smiled, remembering her own amazement at how quickly Charlotte's individual act of kindness had grown into a global movement. "I think Great-Granny hoped it would help more children, sweetheart, but I don't think anyone imagined it would become as wonderful as it has." Charlotte nodded and returned to her letter writing. "I'm glad it became bigger than just me helping some children. It's much more fun when everyone is helping everyone." As Charlotte continued writing by the light of her desk lamp, surrounded by artwork and letters from children around the world, the palace settled into evening quiet. But in dozens of time zones around the globe, children were beginning their days with alliance projects, correspondence with international friends, and the growing understanding that they could make a real difference in the world. The unprecedented royal title had achieved something that traditional diplomacy, international aid programs, and formal educational initiatives had struggled to accomplish. It had created a generation of children who saw themselves as global citizens with the power and responsibility to help each other thrive. Princess Charlotte's remarkable journey from letter-writing 8-year-old to international ambassador had not just earned her a place in royal history, but had fundamentally changed how the world understood the potential for childhood leadership and international cooperation. In creating a title that had never existed before, the Queen had inadvertently created a new model of royal service for the 21st century, one that empowered rather than elevated, connected rather than separated, and inspired rather than impressed. The shock in the palace that had begun with one child's simple act of kindness had become a global celebration of what children could accomplish when they were trusted to lead with their hearts.